When I considered building and cultivating my kitchen garden, I had spent 2 years doing research first. But the thing is, I hadn't actually done the research because I expected to grow a garden. I've been researching leadership and relationship for almost 16 years now. And the thing that I realized is you cannot just look at humans and what we as humans say about relationships, because we too often miss what is right in front of us. Because we as humans are nature, I went looking to nature in broader terms. And so understanding ecosystems, what governs relationships in the natural world, and the way those relationships balance one another, became a poignant path of study for me. The more I researched, the more I realized that everything is relationships. Whether we're talking about the bond between hydrogen and oxygen molecules as they come together to form water, or us with one another, or us with the soil that produces our food and fuels the ecosystem that is our bodies, because yes, our bodies are a type of ecosystem. Or the way that we can feed the soil and ourselves through companion planting. Through all of my learning, I began to realize that relationships are a kind of fractal. Fractals are a kind of geometric pattern, meaning that as you zoom in, at every level, each time you zoom in, you see a similar pattern. So I kept zooming in, and then I kept zooming out, and I kept seeing the same thing. It's all relationships. And if it's all relationships, and there are so many of us experiencing harm at different levels of society, then the thing that is breaking down, the thing that is broken, is the fractal. It's relationships. See, inclusivity and neuro-inclusivity cannot be real if we are not honoring the relationships and continuously investing in the skills, the relationship building skills that make inclusivity possible. I think this microphone isn't making inclusivity possible, just kidding. No, you don't need to turn it up, I'm just moving it. Since ecosystems, systems of relationships, are required for all life, what we are meant to cultivate inside our lives, our communities, our teams, and our organizations are relationships at every level, fractals. And when we get it right and are consistent in our effort to learn more and do better, when we honor relationships the way that they are honored in healthy ecosystems, the results are successful, thriving cultures where inclusivity is built in intentionally, and innovation, success, and profitability are the natural outcome. Before we go any further, I'm going to take some time to talk about ecosystems. National Geographic has a beautiful definition. They define it as a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, as well as weather and landscape, work together to form a bubble of life. A bubble of life. I remember the first time I read that, I nearly leapt out of my chair screaming for joy. Because you'd be surprised how dull most of the definitions for ecosystems are. So plants, animals, and other organisms, plainly, that's diversity. A diverse group of life working together with the weather and the landscape. We could see weather as culture, and the landscape as a support our people need from leadership and other support structures working together to form a bubble of life. Now, that sounds pretty incredible to me. Something where success is sustained and long-term because of consistent investment in that which not only perpetuates life, but makes it possible in the first place, diverse relationships. With that reframing, with the understanding that that's what cultivates success, is our collective success, and the collective is diverse and needs to be embraced that way inside our organizations, understanding each part of the ecosystem has its particular job, its particular relationships and contributions inside of the ecosystem. And if we have too many of the same kind of relationships or contributions, then innovation is not possible and our cultures collapse. The way the ecosystems collapse under the weight of an invasive species, a species that is not honoring the life around it. For a real-life example of why diversity is important, think of the Habsburgs. If you have never had the pleasure of learning about the Habsburgs, don't do it now, but looking into all that members of that family were born with as far as ailments and genetic struggles due to inbreeding is horrifying. They are the reason we are very sure we should never reproduce with our family members. Not just because of how strange they began to look, but because they started becoming very unwell mentally, started dying young, and became infertile. Diversity is necessary or species collapse, ours included. The same concept is true of our organizations. Citibank and Forbes taught us back in 2020, and other financial institutions since then, that the US economy lost out on $16 trillion due to a lack of diversity. And to put that in framing, the difference between 1 billion and $1 trillion is about $1 trillion. $1 trillion in seconds is 32,866 years, times 16. So as far as I can tell, if we do not intentionally, powerfully, and consistently invest in relationship building skills now, and the inclusivity it empowers, it's a really bad plan. Because our communities, organizations, and our world show signs of breaking down and look and act a bit like the Habsburgs. Diversity is necessary or our cultures collapse, and our profits right along with them. And no, proximity is not the same as relationships. Just the way that if you plant beans in a pot near nitrogen-loving plants like tomatoes, the way that the beans contribute to the soil by capturing nitrogen in the air and fixing it in the soil will not be enjoyed by the tomatoes because they are separate. No matter how close you put the pot of beans to the tomatoes, they will never benefit from the nitrogen the beans make available. They have to be together in the soil, working in community with one another. The same is true for us. From where I sit, innovation is a kind of reimagining of relationships, another level of fractal. So don't we think that all the relationships that come together to empower that innovation and the profitability it makes possible need to be intentionally considered and cultivate the kind of cultures that are ecosystems, bubbles of life, in order to cultivate the kind of environment where innovation is not only possible, but continuously probable. Where we are actively invested in creating teams that include those who exist in divergent bodies and with those who have divergent minds, knowing that teams that actively, intentionally reflect human reality and honor all persons and their contributions are not only necessary, but more productive, beneficial, and profitable. It is important to consider that normal is not a standard we should be aiming for. Instead, let's celebrate and honor that we are all divergent in some way. So now that we have covered what an ecosystem is and what it empowers, let's talk about what is required for healthy ecosystem building. Relationships that make inclusivity and neuro-inclusivity real. Who remembers PEMDAS? Anyone? When I speak to teachers, there's definitely a few hands, but it's always a guessing game. PEMDAS is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. It's the order of operations for an algebraic equation. And why does that matter? Well, because putting these thoughts together into an algebraic equation became the most succinct way for me to express them. What happens in the parentheses happens first and must happen together. We must be curious and we must be respectful. And they happen together and first. And then accountability comes in and makes what happens in the parentheses exponentially more powerful. We don't have much time to move through these concepts, but we are going to take a few moments to at least define the terms of the equation. I define curiosity as the desire to know someone or something as they are, not as I want them to be. The distinction is important. The distinction is important because we will never fully understand anyone as they actually are, or anything as it actually is, because we view the world through our knowledge, understanding, our stories, and our experiences, and how the world sees us. There will always be something hidden from our view. When we practice keeping that front and center in our minds and cultures, we begin to understand how necessary and powerful our curiosity is, especially when navigating the world around us together. Engagement with our curiosity is the defining moment when we begin to move from proximity to relationship, but it has to happen with respect. I use the dictionary.com definition of respect. It is due regard for the rights, wishes, and traditions of others. So, curiosity and respect work together. They have to work together because curiosity without respect is intrusive, and respect without curiosity is uneducated. The last concept we have to tackle is accountability. I define it as taking responsibility for the impact of our actions on the people and the lives that have been and are being impacted. Then we learn more, make it right, and do better. The key is, if we only surround ourselves with people who think like us and have similar lived experiences and understanding of the world, we are insulated from accountability. And if accountability is not present, curiosity and respect left long ago, and our people can feel it. Neurodivergent persons like myself, especially those who are at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities, are often the first to see the natural outcome of decisions because not only are we experiencing them sooner than others, but many of us have intense pattern recognition skills and raise our hands to share what we see before the full weight of the harm is experienced across the organization, but are often not met with curiosity, but instead dismissal, infantilization, frustration, and defensiveness. When this happens repeatedly, we often shut down or move on, taking valuable insights with us. We all know turnover is expensive, and part of that is all the knowledge and insights and relationships that walk out the door with those persons. Far too often, those who experience harm first are usually also the people who see the flaws we don't, and are pushing forward our success in ways we do not understand. The way that soil is doing work we do not see, and for most of us, do not understand. Because most of us are not aware that there are billions of microorganisms in a single handful of soil. And it's that life that empowers life to grow from it. But the same life is killed off by the herbicides and pesticides used to maintain monocrops and singular plant species in fields and lawns. And the harm it causes has expanding consequences throughout our world and our bodies. If we are not actively cultivating ecosystems, it is likely we are more invested in monocultures than we realize. Furthermore, I think it's incredibly important that we not forget the role AI is currently playing in facilitating monocultures by denying highly qualified and capable applicants from being even considered. And once denied from a single organization by that AI, will be denied from every other opportunity that uses that same AI. Fractals of relationships means that there are impacts of our actions at every level, most of which we are not consciously aware of. Which is where embracing a diverse array of persons, their thinking and experiences works as a safeguard against harmful decisions when diversity is honored. I want to take a quick second, and we don't have much time left, so I really mean a quick second. And I want to ask you, what do you know positive about poison ivy? Take a second, note that in your mind. We're going to come back to it in just a minute. As we're wrapping up, I want to share this quote. The difference between a garden and a graveyard is what we choose to put in the ground. Poet Rudy Francisco. What we choose to put in the ground, what seeds we plant in our everyday lives affect every level of our lives, our families, friends, communities, and cultures. And what is true at one level is true at every level. Fractals. We can choose to cultivate that which will embrace and empower a thriving, diverse community inside our organizations, a diverse community of persons by personally, professionally, and more broadly inside our organizations, investing in curiosity, respect, and accountability, and reap the rewards. Or continue to ignore the very obvious signs something is wrong and continue forward doubling down like the Habsburgs until the damage is catastrophic. The choice is ours. I believe we can, in this moment, choose to plant the seeds of beautiful relationships in a way that will empower us all to thrive together in incredible ways. And by doing so, make possible our collective thriving. Because human biodiversity creates a chorus of necessary divergences that work together as biological insurance that the human species continues to survive. And honoring diversity, while knowing we all need support, it's the honoring of nuance that makes thriving possible for us all. A bubble of life, where we all succeed long-term together, because it's literally the only way we will. In our final moment together, I want you to take a look at the paper in the middle of the table. They're face down. You probably didn't even notice them. That was on purpose. And I want you to share them. There's one for every other person. And as you read it together, I would love you to note how learning these facts has changed your relationship to poison ivy, or at least your level of respect. That is meant to help us to see parallels in getting more curious in our human interactions. The purpose is to bring forward the reality that even those things or those persons who may irritate us like poison ivy mostly do so because we have more to learn. And when we do, we will discover they deserve our respect because they have powerful ways of contributing to the ecosystem that is our families, communities, and organizations if we would just take the time to get curious, change our minds, and find deeper levels of respect along the way. I hope this moment will help to anchor the idea of the fractal. Whether we are talking about people or poison ivy, it is the honoring of relationships at every level that are the key to not just our organizations, but all of our thriving. Remembering it is us who determines what is normalized. So let's normalize honoring life and be determined to move from proximity to relationship. And in so doing, foster a bubble of life so powerful that we realize, in fact, our thriving is always to be found in us working together. Thank you. I have cards on the table and then also QR code here, but we have a few moments for questions. Does anybody have a question for me? It's okay if you don't, but does anybody have a question? Yes?
What do you find, you do a lot of work in this space.
Yeah.
And what do you find, what have you found, I guess, in our transition of work, if you can, so to speak, especially within the last year and a half? Where do you see, or how do you feel today? Are you inspired about it, or where do you think we have work?
We have plenty of work to do. I think we will always have plenty of work to do because we're human and we get it wrong all the time. And I think that's the point of the whole conversation, is that we will get it wrong. It's going to be messy, it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be non-linear, and that's what it is to be human. I think too often we become convinced that if it's not perfect, if it doesn't feel good, then we shouldn't do it. And quite frankly, our growth comes from discomfort, whether we're talking about as individuals or organizations. So if we're not willing to sit in the discomfort, we're not willing to be the kind of organization that will survive the next decade, and I mean that literally.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the woman right here? Yes.
So, sorry, my question was actually similar. In our spaces, we come to these spaces with our professional identity.
Yeah.
But really, the crucible things in our lives really inform the way that we lead and how we relate. I'm curious for you, what part of your personal crucible experience has informed the way that you relate?
Yeah.
Or if there's something contextual and maybe some of your work within ecosystems that you shared that really have sat on you in a way that informs your entire kind of practice being.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was raised inside of a cult. I'm sure you guys all managed to hear that part. I was raised in extreme Christian nationalism. And when you grow up inside of an ideology that constantly uses thought-stopping cliches, tells you your curiosity is sin, you're undermining, God, and undermining this, that, and the other. If God's that powerful, he can survive my curiosity, right? And so there was this reality that I wasn't living. I could feel it, I knew it in my bones, I was going to die. I was not going to survive if I didn't leave. And there's kind of two paths in that. You can either double down, which lots of people do because you don't want to admit that your entire self-construct is built around something that isn't true or real for you. Or you can be courageous enough to blow it all up. And it takes community in that. I did it by myself, and it took me a long time to find community where I felt safe to be myself. I didn't know another out neurodivergent person until I was in my 30s. So not only was I struggling with neurodiversity and not even understanding myself, because growing up in those environments, it was take your pill, you're healed, now, don't tell anybody, also you're handicapped, also it's your responsibility. Right? So there's all this cognitive dissonance living inside of me that had to be resolved, and I had to find my humanity. And I realized that I had no language for what I wanted my life to be. The only language I was ever given was language it shouldn't be. That I wasn't actually supposed to live in this life, it was only in the next. And I thought to myself, well then why am I alive to begin with? If this is what there is, I don't want it. And I think a lot of people feel that way. But they need permission, even though they don't need permission. They need permission to get messy. Like Miss Frizzle used to say, let's get messy, right? Let's get messy. Let's learn some things. Let's try some things. Let's be humble enough and human enough to actually care to connect with one another, even if it gets weird. Especially when it gets weird, and own up to our nonsense. Because there's a lot of nonsense, I'm like, well, that was shenanigans, Shannon, let's get it together. There's always those moments. And there are people even sitting in this room who have been like, Shannon, that was shenanigans. And I'm like, you're right. You're right, and I'm gonna clean it up and I'm gonna do better, right? But we have to be willing to let people hold us accountable that way. And to Kim's point earlier, in the first year of this administration, companies really pulled back, but they have quietly been reinstating things. I think they were very scared for the first year. I think we all were. But now I see organizations realizing that it is costing them. Just like I said, Forbes and Citibank said, $16 trillion. You don't think they're not feeling that in their bottom line? I mean, you see organizations who are only profitable because they've been raising prices, and you can't do that infinitely. And then all of a sudden their profits stagnate and drop precipitously because people stop buying their stuff. And then they're like, oh crap. Well, it's because you haven't been invested in people, so you don't have any innovation coming down the pipeline. All you have is raising your prices, and people can feel it, whether they're saying out loud or not. And so I've seen organizations coming and reinvesting because they have to if they want to survive. Organizations that are capitalizing on harm, I don't think they have much of a future. They're going to go the way of Kmart, and we're already seeing that with organizations I won't name, but we all know what I'm talking about. Yes, you in the back. This is on wheels, I just realized that. Yeah, it's going to be the last question. I thought I didn't move it in the middle of talking.
Good morning.
Good
what
morning.
a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you more of a deeper dive in that discussion around accountability, because I think maybe 5 years ago that really resonated with leaders, and whether they were doing it right or not, they all were at least acknowledging that accountability is really part of their success of their organization. But there definitely seems to be an evolution of the interpretation of that.
Yes.
And the prioritization, like we would have saw in the past, is not the same today.
Right.
Still the word exists, but it's not at all
Very
applied.
different meaning. Yeah.
Exactly. So I wanted you to maybe give us a sense of how the evolution of accountability is, just to kind of help us get a sense of what was the case and what may be the case today.
Yeah, great question. It's why I define the terms in my work, because there's no escaping what I'm actually talking about. Because in the environments I was raised in, curiosity was confirmation bias, respect was obedience, and accountability was punishment for those lower in the hierarchy, and dismissal of responsibility through a simple apology for those at the top. And an apology is not accountability. Neither is it punishment, right? Accountability is much harder. Accountability is way harder than punishing people. It might feel good to punish someone who has harmed us, but the real work is in accountability, is in saying, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's make it right. Like a very basic example being like a kid who throws a baseball through a window, right? Making it right could look like the parents handing over money to whoever's window was broken and somebody coming out to fix it, and now we're all far removed from it. Accountability looks like that kid having to be responsible to go to the hardware store and get a pane of glass and learn how to fix it or be a part of that process, right? Age appropriately, obviously. Right. But my point is that we can find a way for people to be involved in the process of the repair. And through the process of the repair, there's a learning for everyone involved, especially when you look at community organizers, the way that they're deeply invested in community justice. That model is a beautiful model that honors everyone's humanity, and it's hard work. It's hard work. People love to say, well, what are you going to do with the murderers and so on, the violent criminals? There's an answer for that too. You just have to go looking for it, right? So I think that when we move away from a carceral mindset to a community mindset, now things get more interesting, they get more beautiful, they get more involved, right? They get messier. But at the other side of that is beautiful connection, is the possibility of innovation, right? Because then you can have the conversation, okay, why did you throw the baseball through the window? What was going on for you? In what ways do you not feel fulfilled? Maybe that kid had no after school program. Maybe they have violent parents. Maybe there's there's no support for that person and they're just trying to get attention. Well, now you know that. Now we can innovate and figure out how we can support that child. But we wouldn't have known that if it's just pay the bill and move on, right? So there's innovation, there's power to be found in those moments of connection that we are absolutely breezing right past. And I'm asking us to pause and be reinvested. That's all our time for questions. We have 30 seconds left, so we nailed it. But thank you all. If you have any additional questions, I have cards here on the table. You can scan the QR code and connect with me, and you're more than welcome to ask them. Thank you so much.